I'm Adam Lewis, the pastor at D1 Nez. I'm here to talk to you about best practices for leading a church board. This session is for pastors leading a church board and for anybody who is on a church board that wants to become a better church board member. Now, hopefully your church board meetings are not war zones. Hopefully there is very little anxiety going into your church board meeting, because God never wanted church board meetings to be a war zone or a place where there is a lot of tension and anxiety. As leaders, we need to be able to lead the church board forward in a way that is progressive and in a way that accomplishes things that are set out on the agenda. If your board meeting is more than 4 hours on a regular basis, there's probably some better practices that you can put in place. And so I'm here today to talk to you about best practices for leading a church board. Here's the very first thing that all pastors who lead a church board need to be able to put in place for their board, and that is setting expectations. I know some of the nicest people in the world who are a part of a church. They're members of a church, and then they get voted on to the church board, and suddenly they feel like their only responsibility is to walk into that room and bring up every complaint and every ounce of gossip and everything that's going wrong with the church. That's not necessarily what church board members exist to do. Church board members exist to meet the expectations set for them by the pastor. When they walk into a board meeting, they are expected to come in prayed up, be ready to discuss the matters of the church, especially spiritual matters. They need to come into the boardroom ready to look over financial sheets and understand that church finances look differently than business finances that might be, somewhere else. They need to understand that what is said in the board meeting stays in the board meeting. When I first took over the church I was pastoring in Lincoln, Nebraska, I had 8 board members. The church was running about 140. And I set expectations in front of them. In fact, here is a copy of the expectations that I set before them. And we started to talk through some of them. Let me read just 4 of what these expectations were. To engage in daily quiet time with God, by which He will guide and direct us all. To display a spirit of teachability and openness to growth in leadership, spirituality, and feedback. To assure confidentiality regarding communication in and out of meetings. What is said here stays here. As soon as I got to that one and said that, there was one board member who talked to me after the board meeting and said, I don't think that I will be able to fulfill that expectation. I can't seem to help my mouth. And so in that moment, I had to ask her to step down from the board. Because there are things that will be discussed in the church board meeting that should not leave the church board meeting. Church board members need to experience and exemplify a spirit of confidentiality, being able to hold things in, because there is business that does not need to get out of the church board meeting. Here's the other expectation that I want to read to you. It's to be a part of a leadership team. We will often disagree or at least consider alternative opinions in the process of making a decision. However, once a decision is made, we all support it. When a vote has been taken, we are one body. We would never leave a meeting or report how we or someone else voted or whether we were in personal agreement with the board decision. This seems to be one of the hardest ones for church boards. Again, I was pastoring a church and I had to take to them a vote of getting a new sign that was out in front. We had contacted the Department of Transportation, and we figured out that there were somewhere around 20,000 cars that drove past our church every single day. And the sign that we had out in the front by the street was unattractive, and it was dated. But there were people on the church board that absolutely loved that sign. It was a demigod. It was a golden calf, if you will. And so I led them through a process of bringing up new designs, and I didn't just present it to them and then take a vote. It was several months in the making. And when we got to the night where we had to vote on whether or not to put out a new sign out in front of the church, there were 6 in favor and 2 not in favor of it. But after that meeting, as soon as people started to complain about the new sign, I was so proud of the church board because they stood as a united front. Nobody that I know of said, yeah, I voted no for it, but hey, who am I? They didn't say things like, well, I voted yes, and that person over there also on the board voted no. All of them were a united front. And so the expectation to walk into the board meeting and be prayed up, have a spiritual life of your own, be feeding yourself spiritually, experience or have a spirit of confidentiality, be able to keep things in the boardroom, be able to be a team outside of the boardroom, be teachable, and understand that church business, if you will, looks a little different than business everywhere else. So pastor, if you're leading a church board and you have not set expectations for them, this is the first thing that you need to do. And I want to tell you, it's not too late. Set expectations now. Set expectations for your next board meeting so that they know what is expected of them. If those are not set, your board meetings have the chance to be the Wild West. Here's the second one. It's taking control of two things. Taking control, first of all, of the nomination process. And the second thing is taking control of the actual board meeting. Now, I say take control of the nomination process because the manual in the Church of the Nazarene actually gives the pastor a lot of power in the nomination process. Pastor, nobody knows your people more than you do. You know who is fit for leadership and who is not fit for leadership. And so you take to the church board names for approval. Usually it's 3 board members and 3 lay leaders. They come together with the church roster and they start throwing names up on the board to be on the ballot. You have the power, pastor, to look at a name that might be on that chalkboard or that whiteboard and say, I know this person is not ready spiritually to be on the church board. Being on the church board is not for everybody. Some people think it is for everybody. Some people think it's just for them. That is not necessarily the case. The church board is for people who, number one, love Jesus with all of their heart. They love the local church. And they want to be a part of the decision making that propels the local church forward. And they themselves have to be excellent leaders. Let's be honest, there are some people whose heart is not prepared and not ready and not fit to be on the church board. Pastor, you have the power in that nominating committee to say, I don't think this person is ready to be on the church board, or I think this person needs to take a break. And not only do you say that to the nominating committee, you have to have the backbone to be able to sit down with that church board member and say, I think it's time to take a little bit of a break. That is okay to do. Remember, this is the governing church board. This is the board that will approve decisions and make decisions. And if they are not healthy, then the rest of the church can't be healthy either. So in the nomination process, we take a page out of the Gospel of Luke, chapter 6. Let me read this to you. Luke 6, 12 through 16. It says, Now it came to pass in those days that Jesus went out to the mountain to pray and continued all night in prayer. And when it was day, he called his disciples to himself. And from them he chose 12, who he had named apostles. Simon, who he also called Peter, Andrew his brother, James and John, Philip and Bartholomew, Matthew and Thomas, James the son of Alphaeus, and Simon the Zealot, Judas the son of James, and Judas Iscariot, who would betray him. Now the key to taking control of the nomination process is found in Luke chapter 6, verse 12, where it says, the first step that Jesus took before he picked his team was that he went out to the mountainside and he spent all night in prayer. Pastor, this challenge is for you. How much time do you spend in prayer for the nomination process? What is the ratio of prayer to fear? What is the ratio of prayer to anxiety that you put into the nomination process? Because let's be honest, there's some people that are in that nomination process that their name is on the board and you're very nervous about the possibility of them being voted onto the board because you know that if they are, it will be 12 months of war, 12 months of battle, 12 months of not getting anything done again. Take control of the nomination process. The other thing is taking control of the actual board meeting. Now, The board is over the pastor. They are the ones that can call a pastor, remove a pastor. They have that power. And we as pastors answer to them. But when it comes to the actual board meeting, we are the ones in charge. We are the ones leading them because we are the ones called by them. Now, it's a weird dynamic, I know, but we have to take control of that meeting. Not only have we set expectations and we have taken control of the nomination process, but when you get into the meeting, have a rock solid agenda. Know what you're going to say in each of those points. Allow some conversations, but don't allow the conversation to get to a point where everything has been derailed. Pastor, it's okay to stop a conversation. It is okay to call somebody out and say, your attitude right now is really not pleasing to God, and we need to move this conversation along, or we need to table this issue until cooler heads can prevail. It's okay to say those things. Take control of the room. Take control of the nomination process and take control of the actual board meeting. Here's the third thing. As pastors leading a church board, we have to make sure that we understand our leaders. And a lot of times we don't have background context to them, or we don't consider that when it comes to them becoming a leader of our church board. So here are three quick things that I want to talk about in understanding your leaders. And the first one is understand their background. Understand their family context. Understand where they came from. When the board meeting happens, every single person on that church board brings in with them the family dynamics that they grew up in and that they currently live in. If they had trouble with their parents growing up, if they have trust issues, if they were constantly let down throughout their life, then they will bring that into the board meeting. Because the board meeting may not be a safe place for them. They may not trust other leaders. They may look over at chatter that's happening in the corner and think it's about them, even though it may not be. Understand their background. Sit with them. Have coffee with them. Have dinner with them. Ask about their family history, and that will help you as a leader. Understand why they say some of the things they say and why they behave some of the ways they behave. The second thing is, how do they run their own lives? How do they run their family now? Because again, they will bring those principles into the board meeting and feel like it's working for me and my family. It should work now for my church family. And I'm in a place of leadership. Therefore, everybody has to do what I say because it works for me. And because I've been on this board for 100 years and everybody has always done what I say. How do they run their own lives? And let me speak specifically toward the financial side of things. Because in any size of a church board, you will have people who are bad with money, and you will have people who are good with money, and you will have people who penny pinch with money and don't want to spend a single dollar. And so you bring something to them and say, we need to spend this money on this thing. We need to spend a little bit of extra money on our tech stuff. We need to spend a little bit of extra money in updating our foyer or fixing paint in a room or pipes or something like that. We need to spend money. The church has to spend money in order to stay a functioning building, and the church has to spend money in order to keep the mission going. We cannot hoard our money together. Jesus had to spend money. Paul had to spend money in order to keep the mission going. Pastors, we understand this. And we bring this into the church board, and when we propose something that needs money to be funded, there's going to be some that are like, yep, let's do it, rubber stamp, boom, we're doing it. There's going to be others that go, okay, this time, yes. And there are going to be others that say, I don't think we should spend money ever at all. Pastor, it will help you in the context of the meeting if you understand how they run their own lives. There will be expectations of things like children's ministry, worship ministry, teen ministry, and all of that is based upon how they run their own lives. If they grew up in the church many decades ago and they have a certain style of music that they like, the children's ministry was different then they will bring those things into the meeting and say, don't you think our children's ministry needs to be more like it was in 1976? Don't you think the worship music needs to be more like it was in 1985? How do they run their own lives? This will give you context. Here's the third thing. What have they not experienced yet? In the church boardroom, there are some who have been on the church board for many, many, many decades, and they have seen just about everything that you can possibly see in the life of the church. They have seen the church be in the red and survive. They've seen the church, operate in black ink and survive. They've seen pastors come and go. They've seen pastors be fired. They've seen moments or situations where there was major divisiveness in the church. And they're sitting there as somebody who has experienced all of this stuff. And they look around and say, God is not going to let his church die. I've been through this before. I've seen this before. You're going to have those veterans in your board meeting. But you're also going to have some who are maybe new to the faith. They've only been in the faith for 3 or 4 years. And because of the condition of their heart, they got voted onto the church board, and they've never been a part of a church split. They've never seen a pastor get let go. They've never seen a church operate in the red. They've never been a part of an organization that gossips so much. This is all brand new to them. And so, understanding the dynamic in the room, there are some that will panic when certain situations are presented, mainly because they haven't experienced that as a board member yet. There will be others who won't panic and say, we've seen this all before. So, understand your leaders. What is their background? How do they run their own lives? And what have they not experienced yet? This last point is for you, Pastor, and for the board members. It's for all of you. Out of all of these things that we have talked about, I've saved the most important for last. The most important thing that you can do in leading the church board is praying for their souls. Pray for their souls. Pray for them as husbands and wives in their own families. Pray for them as dads and fathers. Get into their lives. Spend time with them. Pray for them. Teach them the Word of God. And when the board meeting opens, I know that we like to say a quick prayer and they get right down to business. But we started a new practice here at D1 NAS a couple years ago. And that is, we spend the majority of our board meeting in the Word of God and in prayer. So the board meeting might be 2 hours, but 45 minutes of that is prayer and Bible reading. Let's be honest, it may be the only time they open the Bible all month. Function as a small group leader that is making big decisions. Care for their soul. Feed them the Word of God. Pray for them. Tell them you're praying for them. Care for them spiritually. And if they know that you care, then the church board meeting will go a lot better. I hope that these have helped you. If you need any of these resources, please reach out to me, Pastor Adam at d1nas.com, and I would be happy to share anything that I have with you. Thanks for watching.